The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Oh, good morning, everybody. My privilege to be here. If you don't know who I am, I'm Mike Kaylani, one of the pastors here. I get to continue the series that we've been going through on the life of David and gaining principles and wisdom from it. And it's just amazing to me that God has given us examples, such wonderful examples of people we can relate to in Scripture who can teach us about what we're struggling with now. I love that these characters are so relatable to us. Today, I have the distinct privilege of addressing a relationship between David, who we're studying, and his friend Jonathan. David and Jonathan are one of the most historical, famous friendships of all time. They're this model of friendship that we'll be looking at today to apply to our own friendships going on. So as we address this topic of friendship, I just want to acknowledge this fact that friendship is this wonderful thing. It's this magical thing. I mean, I saw this hands-on just last weekend as I took my son to a Boy Scout camp. And at this camp, where, he and his buddies had gone, they do the regular camp stuff, the fun stuff, like swimming, archery, BB guns, things that I know he would like whether he didn't have anybody there with him or not. But they're also earning these badges, these merit badges and these skills and things like that. So they had to change a tire. They had to check the oil on a car. They had to learn how to do the Heimlich maneuver and learn how to do chest compressions and build arts and craftsy stuff that I know he doesn't care about. But if you were to ask him, did you enjoy your time at camp? He would say he loved it. He loved every minute of it. But if I were to try to take him and say, hey, let's go change a tire, he'd be like, what? No, the reason he loved it is because he was doing it with his friends. His friends made things that would otherwise been a chore or monotony into something exciting and fun. That's the power of friendship. Friendship has this amazing ability to take good times and make them great, to make boring things fun, and to even make challenging times durable. Yeah. You can make it through because of friendship. So as we look at friendship, it's my prayer as we look at David and Jonathan, these two men, and we look at that, we sit there and we say, Lord, how do we attain that level of friendship in our own lives? The reality is that friendship is becoming more and more important to us as a society. And I shouldn't say that it's always been important, but it's becoming more and more apparently important because if you just think back in the day, like back in the 50s and 60s and things like that, when you look at the entertainment, the sitcoms and things that were on TV, they were almost all about a family. Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best, The Brady Bunch, things like that. You see these shows that were designed about the family unit. But as we all kind of know, and I'm not here to judge, but as we all kind of know, the family is kind of breaking down a little bit. It's not as strong as it used to be. But yet what you've seen rush in and fill that void are friendships. And you think about Cheers and Friends and Seinfeld and other shows that have taken those spots where the value of friendship has been lifted in our society. If we don't have those relationships within our family, we know we need them somewhere else. And we seek to get them in other places. And of course, as those shows show, there is a variety of friendships out there. I did a fun little exercise, and I said, it's like, okay, what kind of friends do you have? And I asked our staff a little bit, went around and asked a few people. The one I put on there, the kind of friends that I've had in my life, and this is probably because I am this friend, is the debater. The friend that is always, is going to take the other side of the issue with you. They want to talk about every issue, and they're always going to talk about everything. They never let it lie. They love to debate. They love to argue. I know I tend to fall in there, and I know it's a little bit of a guilty, but people who enjoy that tend to be like being around me. But that's not the only kind of friend there is. There's the friend that I call the oak. That friend who is always there, never moving, solid, steady. They're that oak of a friend where you never wonder if they're going to be there when you need them. Of course, there's other people said things like there's the mooch. The friend that doesn't seem to own anything themselves. I'm sure you've had one of these. They're always borrowing your stuff. And you're like, you bear with it because you know you love them, but they exist, and if you don't know who it is, it may be you. My favorite, though, was someone brought up the overtoucher. There's that friend who does not have personal space. You guys know this one? They're always hugging or like, putting their arm around you or massaging your shoulders or whatever. They're that friend who doesn't know that there are people have boundaries. And they physically are there, I'm going to miss BJ because BJ was this kind of friend. He was the guy who hugged you and you felt like, violated a little bit when he did so. But there's all these kind of friends, and the list could go on. And I actually want to show you a video that will kind of help you classify, because as you watch this video, my prayer is that you'll sit there and you'll say, oh, I know that person. Oh, I know that person. So watch this.
Hey, Tyler.
What?
What do you do when you see a spaceman?
I don't know.
You park your car in it, man.
It's funny.
Yeah, why aren't you laughing?
I said that's funny.
Yeah, but that's what you do when you can't even muster up a courtesy laugh.
I don't know what you want from me right now.
I don't know. Maybe just a...
That's not really my style. I'm more of a...
Oh, I'm kind of a... He said you park your car in it. It's a spaceman.
You can relate to that, right? You have these people in your life, and you love them for it. There is a variety to the friends that are given to us, and I love that variety. But the truth is there's also a common denominator among those relationships that make them genuine friends. Regardless of their personality, regardless of their style, what is it that makes someone a genuine friend? And that's what we're going to look at today. We'll look at David and Jonathan as our example and our model. So if you would stand with me in honor of God's word, we're going to read from 1 Samuel chapter 18, verses 1 through 4. And it says, after David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return to his father's house. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic, and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. Lord Father, I ask that you would use your word to mold our perceptions, shape our reality. Help us to see, Lord, the way you designed friendship to be. May the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart be pleasing to you today. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, David and Jonathan are these unique friends. I mean, they're not the normal run-of-the-mill friends. I doubt you probably have met a friend like this. See, what happened was right after David had killed Goliath and was being honored in front of the whole nation, Jonathan bonded with this man, and they became friends from that point forward. Their friendship actually extends over dozens of chapters and goes all the way to 2 Samuel chapter 1. What you'll find is that after that moment, they may have known about each other, but they didn't know each other until that moment after Goliath. And they formed that friendship. And the scripture says for a while, they fought side by side. And I'm sure, when David got his reputation for being a man who would kill tens of thousands, Jonathan and him were playing those games of like who could defeat more of the enemy. Because Jonathan himself was no lightweight. If you look back at 1 Samuel 14, you'll see that before David was even on the picture, there was a time when the armies of Israel were in a bad position, and the armies of the Philistines were on the cliff, looking down upon the armies of Israel. And the armies of Israel weren't moving. They were just kind of sitting because they knew they might lose if they go up to battle. And Jonathan saying, "Where is your faith?" He sits there and says, he takes his one armor bearer and says, "I believe in God. I believe God can bring victory." So he goes up, he climbs the cliff, takes on an outpost, the ones who are watching the army, defeats the outpost and starts to make them run. And only after Jonathan and his single armor bearer start to cause the Philistines to run does the rest of the army of Israel follow suit and take notice of what Jonathan was able to do because he believed in God. Now, I say that because when David defeated Goliath, one of the reasons I think that Jonathan and David's relationship started and bonded was because Jonathan saw in David a kindred spirit. He saw this man who had the same faith and belief that he could take on any challenge if God was for him in David. And so they immediately bonded. And I'm sure as their friendship grew, they fought side by side. They won battle after battle. Unfortunately, as the story goes on, as David became more and more successful, he became more and more of the king kind of saw him as a threat. And so what happened is their relationship, they once were fighting side by side, now they're fighting together to preserve the relationship of David with his king. And what's interesting is we don't read about this much or teach on this subject much, but there's a point when David goes before the king and he says, "David is a noble man, a good man. He does nothing but want to serve you and honor you." And Jonathan reconciles Saul the king and David. And there's a moment of peace where Jonathan actually is able to mend the broken relationship. Unfortunately, as time goes on, that relationship begins to unravel again. And Jonathan once again goes before the king and he says, "What are you doing? David is a good man." And then the king even goes to Jonathan and says, "Don't you realize if David remains alive, you will never be king?" And Jonathan says, "I'm not going to break my friendship with this man just because I want my throne." And he maintains his friendship. He helps David escape. And then they remain friends apart for many years. And the next time we hear of Jonathan is way in the end of 1 Samuel, where he and his father and his brothers have gone out in battle against odds they can't beat. The Lord has kind of left Saul, so he's no longer empowering his army. And Jonathan and his brothers and his father all fall in battle. That's the last we hear of Jonathan. But yet we hear David's words about Jonathan in 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 25. Let me read this to you. "How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. How the mighty have fallen. The weapons of war have perished." We see that even though they had to be separate, that they had to flee from one another, their friendship remained strong and steady. They were there for each other. They loved each other. And when we read this story and we hear about a story like a friendship like this, I think that and I believe that every single one of us desires to have that level of friendship in our life. Someone who's going to be there with us thick and thin, no matter what. Someone who's going to be there when times get hard and when things get rough. Someone who's going to be there to fight the good fight together. That's the kind of friendship we desire. Not a temporary one, not one that'll fade, not one that's of convenience, but one that is solid. And I think the biggest threat to us actually developing those kind of friendships in our lives is ourselves. When we settle for something less than what God intended friendship to be. And I'm going to list 4 things that I believe we settle for that are less than genuine friendship. And tell me if you don't see some of this. There's what I consider people who settle for convenient friends. Convenience friends these are the kind of friends that you just happen to be friends with because it's convenient. Maybe they work next to you. Maybe they're your neighbor. Maybe you take the same class. Maybe your kids are in the same class at school. And guys, I'll be candid, maybe your wives are friends. And you just happen to be there because the husbands have to join you every now and then. Those are convenience friends. What I mean by convenience is I talked to a lady in the first service who started a friendship as convenient friendship, but they've been friends now 69 years. And her friend is going on 100 years old. But they started by working together. Convenient, there's nothing wrong with these things that I'm about to mention, but they're not genuine friendship unless we grow them deeper. What happens in convenience friendships is that sometimes we think of them as genuine friendships, but when the convenience goes away, let's say you take a new job, let's say you move out of the neighborhood, let's say you go to a different school, whatever it might be, the friendship evaporates as well. That was not genuine friendship. That was convenience. Another thing that we sometimes fall into is the consumer friendship. This is the networking type friendship, where you make friendships for your own purposes. I'm going to get to know this person because I might be able to make a deal with them. Or, man, they've got a nice, they've got a lake house, and I want to be invited to that lake house. So thus, I'm going to be friends with them. You kind of see where I'm going. That happens in our society. And if you look at celebrities are often very alone because everybody who wants to be their friend wants to be their friend for themselves, not for them. They're consumer-minded friendships, and we too can fall into that same rut. And we think about, I want a friend. I want that person to be my friend because I want what they would maybe offer me. That mentality is consumer-minded friendship. And if that person, or let's say you're on the receiving end of it, and let's say you dry up, or your resources run out, or you're no longer on top of your game, or you're not the popular guy anymore, you see your friends just kind of walk away. And then also another one is this idea of just quantity. In our world, social media has just gotten this one up to a high level. According to Facebook, I have 1,000 friends. I have some great friends, but I do not have 1,000 friends. I always feel like we need a different word because we start using friends in so many ways that we've gotten to this place where we honestly think that the number of people we have considered friends is more important than the few that we need that are genuine. And we can caught in this game of saying, I have so many friends, but I don't really have a real friend. And the one I think that as a church we have to be most careful of is what I call tribes. Friends that are simply there because we agree about things. We believe that Jesus is Lord. We believe that, on being moral or conservative or whatever it is. There are times when people they consider friends because they're just a part of a group that all shares similar beliefs and ideals. But yet, if they were ever to change their mind or they were ever to question any of those beliefs or ideals, they may find their friendships falling away pretty quickly. They maybe find themselves being booted out of the group. I mean, Austin is filled with people who are united by something, some group. I mean, there's the swimmers, the cyclists, you can go anywhere. I mean, you can go to a roller skating rink and you'll see people who are united around roller skating. I mean, they exist. But if you were ever to stop skating, you wouldn't really see those friends much anymore, would you? If you ever stop attending this church, would your friends here still remain your friends if you were to go through a time? If not, those are not genuine friends. Reality is that God had something in mind when he created friendship. Like I said earlier, it's a magical relationship. It's a wonderful relationship. He had something in mind when he created it. But unless we know what that is, then a lot of times we don't really know if we're settling for a counterfeit or not. And I remember when I was a kid, my parents went to the Bahamas for something. They came back and they had Bahama money. You ever seen Bahama dollar bills or whatever it is? They look like Monopoly money. They're colorful. It doesn't look like real dollar bills. And I honestly would not have any clue if you were to hand me a $100 or 100 euro bill. I have no idea if that's legitimate or not. Because I don't know what a euro. Now, if you handed me a $100 American bill, I know if it's authentic or not because I've seen those. But if you hand me the other, I don't know what I'm looking for. I'm sure I might accept it. I might be a sucker and say, "Oh yeah, sure, 100 euros. That's nice." And you could have just Xeroxed it or drawn. Obviously, I'd probably catch you if you drew it, but you know what I'm saying. If I don't know what I'm really looking for, I'll fall for the counterfeits, won't I? And so as we look at Jonathan and David, let's look at some of the things that are key principles of genuine friendship according to how God made it. And I want you to notice something. First off is that friendship is a covenant. If you look at 1 Samuel 18, you'll see in there as it says that Jonathan made a covenant with David, this is verse 3, because he loved him as himself. Now, we don't often think of covenants in the context of friendships, do we? We think of covenants like as marriages or business agreements or things like that. But here it says that a friendship is actually a covenant. And a covenant is a binding agreement. You can't just get out of a covenant because you have a change of heart or because you just don't feel like it. There's consequences to breaking a covenant. A covenant is a binding agreement, and that's what a friendship is as well. It's not something that speaks directly against those friendships that are just convenient, temporary. A genuine friend is a friend for life, someone you're united with, someone whose life is as important to you as yours is to you. When I thought about this, what I realized is how important, how friendship goes well beyond just my people I grew up with. I ought to be friends, good friends, with my family, with my wife, and with those people who God has brought in my life. This covenant is a vital covenant. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means and some other aspects. But I find it interesting is that you'll see this in David's life. After this covenant is made between Jonathan and David, David will not do anything to harm Jonathan, even though Jonathan's father continues to pursue David and try to kill him. In 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 11 through 12, hear David's own words, where he says, as he's speaking to Saul, "See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. Now understand and recognize that I am not guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you." He has made a covenant that he values that life as much as his own. He will not break his covenant. That is the kind of relationship, a friendship is. Even if that friend turns on you, or goes down the wrong path or pushes you away, you've made a covenant. You stick with that person. You see that in there. Not only do you see that friendship is a covenant, but you also see that there's this idea of being accountable to excellence in a friendship. You know, there's this time when David realizes that Saul is coming after him, and he goes to Jonathan and says, Jonathan, show me what I have done wrong. If I have done it wrong, you be my judge, you be my executioner. I do not want to be in sin against your family, against your household. And Jonathan, when Jonathan says, I can't believe my dad would be against you or want to take your life, Jonathan has to say, David, he's throwing spears at me. You know, he's trying to pin me to the wall. He's trying to kill me, man. You know, go talk to him. You'll find for yourself. But what's interesting to me is that they're willing to speak truth into each other's lives in order to be better men. I'm sure they did it on the battlefield as they fought together and they tried to one-up each other. But here you see it very clearly as they sit there and they go, show me where I'm wrong. Where are my blind spots? I'm an open book to you. I will listen to you. I'm accountable to you. I want to be a better man. You know, a friend is not someone who just tells you what you want to hear all the time, or is always going to agree with you. You're going to always say what you want them to say. A true friend is someone who will tell you tough news if you need to hear it. Will tell you the truth when other people may not have that liberty in your life. So it's covenant, accountability, excellence. And the last one is this idea of selfless sacrifice. You'll see this in several places. But Jonathan and David were willing to sacrifice themselves for the other. David was willing to put his own life and say, if it's me, take my life. I would rather you thrive than for me to be a place of tension, a sore spot between you and your father. And then Jonathan himself goes before his father, stands between his father and David metaphorically, stands before them, and he says, Dad, what are you doing? He's a good man, and he suffers the wrath of his own father. And I love this. When Saul says, Jonathan, if we don't kill David, you will never be king. That's okay to Jonathan, because his friend is more important than a throne. I even think that Jonathan kind of knew. You know, when he took off his own robe and his own armor and everything and gave it to David, I think he knew that David is a better man to be king than I am. He was willing to sacrifice everything for his friend. So when you look at these ingredients and you sit there and you go, these are some of the core ingredients of a genuine friendship, what you'll find, and this is kind of what I found as the summary over it all, is that friendship at its core is a struggle. That friendships are formed by struggle and for struggle. A friendship is a bond that is formed by struggle and for struggle. Now, we often think that friendships are designed for fun, aren't we? You know, we think of friends as, you know, picnics and cookouts and, you know, going to the beach together and things like that. And that's true. The friendships, like I said, can take things and make them more fun. They can make things better, and that's what they're designed to do. But ultimately, we know the value of a friend when we have been in one of those times of struggle. When friends are most important to us is when we've been going through something difficult, struggling, having a hard time. That's when we need a friend the most. That's when they're most valuable to us, right? Friendships are born for struggle, born in struggle and for struggle. This is one of the things I saw in the text that just amazed me the most. If you look at when they became friends, you know, Jonathan kind of came alongside David, and there's the whole part in 18 where he said he knit his soul to David's, and Jonathan became one in spirit with David. He loved him as himself. He made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David. He became David's friend before he even knew David. He may have known David as an acquaintance. He may have known of David, but he didn't know David. But what he knew was David's heart for this struggle that was the same as his heart. As I said earlier, these men are of kindred spirit. In 1 Samuel 14:6, Jonathan says, "Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." That's his faith, his boldness. He knows that God will bring victory. He's fighting for God's kingdom. And then you see David's own words. He says, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine who's Goliath. Your servant will go and fight them." Both of these men had this courageous spirit, this passion for God's kingdom, to see the nation, God's nation, be victorious. They both had this passion. And when Jonathan saw that passion in David, before he even knew who David was, he knew that this man was going to be his friend, because they shared a struggle. They shared a joint passion for something greater than themselves. When I think about what we desire for our church, that is where JJ just talked about, our church is made up of three pieces. You're here at worship right now, but there's also the piece of community, and there's also the piece of mission, worship, community, mission. That's who we are. That's what we're about. And what I find interesting is I look at where friendships are formed. Friendships are formed around community and mission. Now, not everyone's struggle is the same, and to be honest, there's a lot of, but friendships are formed around a variety of struggles. I mean, some of your best friends are probably friends that you made when you were struggling through your adolescent years, trying to figure out, why is my voice changing, and, what do I do with these things called girls, and, you know what I'm saying? You've developed some strong friendships there. Because you were going through your adolescent years together. I'm sure there's some of us who have developed great friendships because of the fact that, we were going through really hard times with somebody. We were going through maybe an illness or a layoff or something of that sort, and we struggled with those things, and we built these bonds of friendships around those things. I mean, maybe your passion is bringing disco back, and you have friends who you're going to really try to bond with and try let's get on this together. Let's bring disco back. That's our mission. You can have a variety of missions. There's no doubt about that. But have you ever noticed sometimes as you mature and what you're passionate about changes, that a friend who doesn't share that, maybe you shared that passion for getting through adolescence together, but now you're passionate for God and they're not? How the friendship struggles a little bit? Friendships are born around a common struggle. And so when we think about what we're trying to do here, yes, it's great that we want people to have friends here, but not tribe friends, just friends who agree with you all the time, not convenience friends. We want to help people develop those friendships that are centered around a passion for something greater than themselves, a struggle that is bigger than themselves. When I looked at this, the principles that I got out of this that I saw is that sometimes we want friends. We want to develop friendships. We want those things in our life, but we don't want to have to struggle for anything. We want this for our own sake. We're not willing to be passionate about a cause or for the struggle of Christ. And then we wonder why we can't develop these genuine, deep friendships. It's because we don't have that struggle. So we sit there and we look at that's a vital piece of developing genuine friendships, is find something that matters more than you. Find something that you're passionate about. Not only that, but there's that point where you have to sit there and eventually you have to be open. You have to open up yourself to be accountable to other people and let someone speak in your life. If you're not going to let people in, then you're not going to be able to develop those deep, genuine friendships that you yearn for. But what I love also, and you see this in David and Jonathan, is they didn't demand the friend of the other, but they sought to be the friend they wanted to be. And so instead of asking God to bring them friends, they decided to be a friend to somebody else. And Jonathan was determined to be David's friend. And he made that covenant selflessly united to David. without any expectation of anything in return, and that friendship was born. We often miss how genuine friendships are developed and shaped. When I think about, how we as a church desire people to get into small groups, I know sometimes that people think of that as just another activity. But please understand what we're trying to do. And as a church, as we encourage you to get involved in mission and community, our desire is that you'll develop some of those deep, deep friendships because of that. And that because that you have a friend with you now, no matter how hard the struggle may be, that friend will make it a lighter burden, an easier time, more fun. Just like anything else, if you do it with a genuine friend, it becomes a joy. So, one of the things I found interesting about all of this is if you look at the life of Christ and his apostles in John chapter 15, there's that point when the apostles start to get it and they start to become on mission with Jesus. And when Jesus says, he shows that when he realizes that these disciples are starting to be co-laborers with him, to be in that same struggle with him, he says these famous words where he says, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you. That even Jesus himself would sit there and say, I want to be your friend. Join me in this struggle. Let's glorify my Father's name. Let's transform our world together. I will be there. And you cannot help but see the gospel in Jonathan and David's relationship. As Jonathan interceded, stepped in between the wrath of Saul and David, how do you not see Jesus doing that for us every day? Stepping in between wrath and joy. Jesus wants to be our friend. As we take communion today, we're going to have that opportunity to acknowledge that reality. We're going to be able to come before God and say, Lord, thank you for being willing to be my friend, for sacrificing for me, for being a friend to me. And our prayer is as we take communion that we will respond with an equal commitment to him and to one another. Lord Father, I want to thank you so much for the privilege it is to come before you on this day. Thank you so much for being able to be called your friend. I pray for our time now, Lord. As we prepare to take the elements, prepare our heart. May we not see our friendship with you as the casual one, as a temporary one, as a conditional one. But may we truly see it as a sacrificial covenant with you. May we not take these elements lightly, Lord. I pray this in your name.